Welcome to The Lens with me, Sarah Travers. The Lens is a Business in the Community podcast in partnership with One Young World. I'm delighted to introduce our guest today, Clarke Carlisle, former Premier League football player, award-winning presenter, mental health champion and ambassador for the addiction charity Bet No More. In this episode, Clarke speaks very frankly about his own experience with mental health. He shares some top tips for employers as they endeavour to help their people face challenges in life and work. And he explains how he and his wife Carrie are a force to be reckoned with in campaigning to help those with addictions. So to find out more, I'm going to hand over to my former BBC colleague, health correspondent Mary-Louise Connolly, who had the opportunity to speak to Clarke at Business in the Community's recent Healthy Working Lives conference.
Clarke Carlisle, would you like to join me on the stage? You're the first.
Thank you very much.
Quick warm-up for you. You are used to these 5-second answer rule. You're not allowed to think too much. Favourite food?
English breakfast.
Favourite TV show?
Countdown.
A run or a gym session?
A run, definitely.
Beach or city break?
Beach.
Favourite number to wear on the back of a football shirt?
5.
Yeah, 5.
Carlisle 5.
Okay, so Clarke, you've experienced the highs and the lows of professional sport. Can we start with the high? Talk us through that winning goal. Take us back to 1997. You were playing for Blackpool. Let's pretend we're on the set of Match of the Day. And we're talking about that winning goal. Tell us about it.
Oh, wow. It's hard to convey the magnitude of a moment like that. And to talk about that winning goal, I'll be as brief as possible. 17 years of age, it's my home league debut for Blackpool. And it's the first game of football that my mum's ever been to. You know, my dad's been to every game since I was yay high. And football was my connection between me and my father. You know, he invested so much time going without meals to ferry me around the country in search of this dream. So to make my home debut at Blackpool, it's a 95th minute, thereabouts. It's 1-1, get a corner on the left-hand side. It's whipped in, flicked on at the front post, and bang! There's yours truly at the back post with a diving header to score a 95th minute winner.
Brilliant.
I went herring over to mum and dad in the stand like, I had veins popping out where I didn't know veins existed. But this was like me paying my dad back for everything that he'd invested in me. All the time and effort, but also it showed my mum something, you know, I could do this. It was a huge moment for me, and it was where I fell in love with football for what it could do for me.
But such a high, and being in the public eye, being a professional footballer, everything that comes with that takes its knocks as well. So can you recall the moment when you were on such a high, but then you got that knock?
Yeah, there are multiple moments. You know, the thing about football is it's all-consuming, and you don't separate work from life. You know, I would go and play a match, and if I played poorly, then I came home as a bad human. Yeah. I felt like I was a bad father and a bad husband. And more than that, it's compounded by your societal interactions. And especially at the larger clubs that I've been at, you know, I remember Leeds United. Oh, wow, such passionate partisan supporters. But if I played poorly on a Saturday and then had the audacity to go out with my family for a dinner on the Sunday, you know, people will come up to me and say, oh, look at you, smile on your face, you don't even care. But that, you know, that was my family time. It wasn't work. And so there's no separation of the two.
So how does a young person particularly deal with that amount of public pressure and criticism?
With great difficulty. And it's even harder nowadays because, you know, I started in the mid-90s and social media only came about throughout the course of my career. Now we have young people where social media is their community interaction. interaction, you know. And what I've been learning with my many children, I've got 5 children, 25, 17, 15, 7 and 5.
Keeps you young.
Yeah, we call it, it's a good spread, it's a buffet. You know, what I'm understanding is I shouldn't judge them for their interactions. Their community and social interactions just happen to be different to how I did it. So rather than imposing what I think it should be like, I need to learn what it is like for them, because this is their actuality, especially post-COVID, when a lot of their physical interactions were you know, they were severed. So how do we cater for young people coming through in that industry? I think it's a process that we need to implement for wider society and general population. We need to give our young people an understanding of their value as human beings, without that being attached to a vocation, a job, a profile, a number of followers. You know, understanding the whole self. For me, from a very young age, football, I was Clarke Carlisle the footballer, inextricably linked. And this led to an inordinate amount of problems for me in retirement, because when you took away that thing that was my very core identity, I had no worth. Yeah. I had no value, even though I'd gotten a degree, I'd gotten a new career path in broadcasting, you know, I had opportunity, and circumstantially everything, you know, abounded. But here, I had no worth and no value.
Do you think the football industry has changed a little bit at the moment, where there may be the footballers, Premier League, they don't go out to clubs as much at the weekends, you know, it's more discipline and control about fitness and physicality?
It's a far more professional environment now than it ever was, yeah. And wider society, you know, has a greater grasp on the importance and value of physical health and physical fitness. But, you know, that in no way will compensate for the journey of the individual. But it doesn't matter what demographic you're in, what vocation, what sector. We are all human beings. And it's not just the understanding of self. There's a notion that mental health is something that is given to us, and especially when we're talking about in the workplace. You know, we often found, my wife and I have been delivering in and across any and every sector all across the UK and Europe, and we find a lot of employees are asking, what are you doing for me? What have you got for me as an employer? And you can put on every resource available for your employees, but if they don't engage with that resource, if they don't have the agency to take the action that's necessary, they won't get well.
Before we move on to those tools and what providers and employees should be doing, can we draw a little bit from those life challenges that you have had, that have given you the tools in order to help others? So there have been some darker times in your life. It just wasn't all about scoring goals, but there have been massive life challenges. What have you learned from those, and how did you get through them? Was it just a flick of a switch, or did it take a long time?
Not at all. It took a long time, and that's because of my lack of understanding about what was going on. My first suicide attempt was in 2001, 21 years of age. I got a knee injury where the surgeon said, Clarke, you'll never play football again. In fact, you'll have to walk with a stick. So I've tried to briefly explain, you know, how important football was to me. Without football, I saw myself as worthless, took an overdose. I was found, you know, taken to hospital. Spoiler alert, I'm alive. But at that time in 2001, it was packaged off as though it was a naughty thing and I'd gotten away with it. You got away with that, let's pretend it never happened. That was the inception of my depression, although I didn't know it at the time. So then for 12 years, when I developed these maladaptive coping mechanisms, and by that I mean I'm getting, you know, rising emotion or fears or anxiety, a threat to my identity or my job, and my brain is saying, last time you tried to kill yourself, run away, run away. So I would get drunk, I would go to casinos, I would sleep, I would play computer games for days on end, I would hibernate and isolate. But over that whole time, we just thought it was me being an idiot. there was no understanding that these were symptoms of a wider issue.
So was it ever talked about as an illness, that Clarke Carlisle
No, not at all.
actually has a mental health illness?
No, if you'll pardon my French, for many years we just thought that Clarke Carlisle was a dick and he couldn't make responsible decisions, and that's how it was packaged, and that's how I framed myself. I couldn't understand it, because these actions that I would break out in every 3 or 4 months, you could almost run a calendar by them, they were contrary to my values, my core, who I wanted to be, my identity, and the internal conflict was huge, which exacerbated the actions. So in 2010 I eventually got a diagnosis of depression, because
Was that an easy thing to get? That
yes, it was at that point.
How did you go about doing it?
Because my wife was my ex-wife, and this is part of the work that you've been doing. She had our second child. I was playing in the Premier League. I was chairman of the PFA. Life was perfect, and every time I came home, she was crying by the radiator, and I'm like, "Well, what on earth is wrong with you? Our life is perfect." She said, "I've got postnatal depression. Read up about it." So I did, and I was like, "Oh, that's me. That's me. That's me. That's me." Rang the doctor at Burnley. I said, "Doc, I'm reading about postnatal depression. Think I've got it, but I've not had a baby." "Clarke, you've got depression, da-da." So he gave me a pill, fluoxetine. Did I take it? No. Why? Because I'm a man. I don't need happy pills. I'm a Premier League footballer. I'm chairman of the PFA. No one told me that they're not happy pills. It was never explained to me what this.
Because if you had another illness, whether it be your knee injury or a head injury or cancer or another illness, you take medication. But if you have a mental health illness, to be given an antidepressant, it's almost a stigma around it.
Yeah, very much so. Like I said,
And should we be talking about that in a different way then?
Definitely. My vernacular was that they were happy pills. Yeah. It wasn't explained to me that with some people you experience trauma, chemical balance in your brain is adjusted. For some people it doesn't readjust, and this medication helps balance that thinking. It doesn't fix your problems. It doesn't make you happy or sad. It just allows you to see your problems for what they are, and not the exaggerated veil that my depression was giving me. Wasn't explained to me. So I didn't take them, and I walk into life with a label of depression but doing nothing about it. And that was the dangerous thing, because I thought I had it wrapped because I had a label. And then my depression got worse and worse and worse, compounded in retirement, and then thus ensued another 3 suicide attempts, Mary-Louise. So it was only in 2017, and again, this is a really important point for me to make.
Were they cries for help? Or did you want to be noticed? Did you want somebody to come in and help you, or did you really want to leave this world?
Not at all. They were, well, I put myself in front of a lorry on the motorway, 60 miles an hour. So no, that wasn't a cry for help, Mary-Louise. That was, I genuinely believed that I was an abject blot on society, that my wife would be better, my children would be better off, that I was stealing oxygen from another human being that deserved it. This is why I'm talking about that internal narrative, because I never shared that, even with my nearest and dearest, never mind in a safe professional environment. And it goes on and on and on. It became my subconscious belief.
Voices in the head.
And so this action, it wasn't an escape, it was the right solution for everybody. So between 2014 and 2017, I went into private psychiatric care 3 times. Now, I got excellent care when I was in there, but I might as well have been at the Galgum. Because once I left, it was like you check out and they give you a pamphlet and off you pop. And then my cycles repeat and I'm back in a year's time. It was only in 2017 when I went into NHS care that my life changed. A, I got a right diagnosis. B, I got the right level of medication. C, I was introduced to cognitive analytical therapy, which was life-changing.
Okay, can we talk? Something happened, a positive thing. You turned the corner.
Oh yeah.
What happened with that treatment? Why did it work when other things hadn't?
It worked, and it worked because, to my mind, at that point, I'd tried everything, and my diagnosis of recurrent complex depressive disorder to me, I thought, that's it. It's recurrent. It's coming back. There's nothing I can do about it. That's it. This cycle is inevitable. So I was very, negative and down on my own prognosis on life being enjoyable at all. But when I was in psych hospital in Blackburn, NHS, I was introduced to CAT, Cognitive Analytical Therapy, where you mind map all your thought processes. It was spectacular for me, because my behaviours and my responses have become so autopilot that when situation A happened, I immediately believed that Z was the outcome. But when we put it all out here, I realised that there were 7 different junctures where I could take action and promote a different outcome, take a different response to what was going on in my life. And that element of, I know it's an ethereal word, hope, transformed my pathway. Not only that, in understanding that there were these junctures of choice and action, it gave me power back. I was empowered. It gave me agency over what happens in my life circumstances.
And sorry, was it someone who pointed all this out to you within the NHS, or was it something that you worked out for yourself? Like, how do we find those answers?
It was a collaboration, a joint exploration with my therapist at that time. And, again, this is a very important point, because I had one therapy session in 2003 and I didn't like it. I thought I'd done therapy and it's shite and it doesn't work for me. Your therapeutic relationship actually dictates 60% of your therapeutic outcomes. So even if you are trying CBT and you don't like this therapist, I don't mean you personally, I don't know if you are a therapist, then effectively it's like dating. You don't go on one date and then because it doesn't work out think, oh, that's it, I'm going to be single all my life. No, you move on to the next person until you find that relationship. Identical with therapy. If that modality doesn't work for you, CBT doesn't work for me because I think it's just a sticking plaster over responses. I'm one of those people who needs to know the why. The where did it come from? How can I actually make, meaningful cerebral pathological change? So that's why I needed CAT to go on that whole almost Freudian exploration of where I've been. But it's finding what works for you.
Yeah. And sometimes that can be a combination of things, that cognitive therapy, but also exercise. And it can be just walking out, fresh air. It doesn't have to be gym sessions or marathon running, but it's just finding that one thing that gets you out of the house, gets you to stop looking at the 4 walls, and gets you talking to somebody.
Again, and this is one of the most difficult things for you as people within your workplace, that nearly 8 billion people on the planet, which means there are going to be nearly 8 billion different ways to be well. So how are you going to facilitate that? Well, you can't cover them all, but what you can do is, if you're an SME, try and collaborate to have some kind of overarching umbrella. If you're a larger organisation, try and develop a smorgasbord of try before you buy. It's not that this is the way, it's that these are some of the possible ways, and encourage your employees to go on this exploration journey. We know that physical activity is a fundamental pillar of health and well-being. Now, here's an irony, is it? When there's a crossover point as a professional athlete where when your career is actually determined by your physical health and ability, it becomes a stressor. It's no longer just something you do nicely. It's your livelihood depends on it. So it's not just about being fit, it's about being the fittest you can be, being fitter than everyone else, setting against times and targets, etc. So that detracts from your health and well-being. And one of the hardest things I've had to learn post-retirement is just general activity for fitness and not for competition. Honestly, if I get if I go in the gym, like you said, and go on the treadmill, I'll be doing a run, and after about 4 minutes, my brain says, "You can go quicker than this." You're only cheating yourself. I bet he's running faster than you. Clarke, you should be in the Olympics next year. And it's an internal, monologue that I have to counter. Now, the amazing thing is that we can counter it. Are you aware, not just of what you're thinking, but how you process what you're thinking?
How important is it that employers who are here today, how much responsibility do employers have to look after the mental and physical makeup of the workforce?
You have a huge responsibility. We have a huge responsibility. It's in the Health and Safety at Work Act 1971, has been in there in black and white from then. But
do we ignore it, do you think? Do a lot of employers ignore that?
Well, it's not that they ignore it. I just don't think there's a comprehension of the extent of it. Personal injury is any disease or impairment of a person's physical or mental being. It's been there since 1971. And you think about the extent that we go to for physical health. I mean, I just started a new role at Gordon Moody, and I had to go through a 1.5 hour induction on how to lift boxes. That's the extent that we've taken that. Do we go to that extent about our employees' mental health and well-being? How much induction do we do about that? Education, supervision, instruction, training and supervision across that for our mental health. So we have that responsibility, but that is only to provide the resources and signpost to. What we have to get across to our employees is that they have a responsibility to engage and make sure that they are well to work.
I could talk all day to you, Clarke, I really could. There are questions in the audience. We're going to take two, I think. Where are they coming from? Hands up. Here's one. Great. Hello.
Hi, Mary-Louise.
Hello.
Hi, Clarke. It was great to hear your story. Just a question in relation to mental health. What would be the best piece of advice you would give to us here in the room in terms of looking after that?
Looking after our mental health. Huge question.
It is a huge question. My advice to everyone would be to be deliberate about it. And when you're deliberate about it, by that I mean prioritise self-care in your day.
Yeah.
I diarise my self-care. I take half an hour every morning and every night, no matter how busy I am, for whatever you want to call it, meditation, reflection. I read my Bible, sometimes I pray, sometimes, and I've had to force myself to learn to do this. I sit and be. And it's the hardest thing to do. That's really important and helpful to me. But in prioritising self-care, you're showing yourself in amongst your busy schedule that you are worth time and attention. And that's one of the foundation steps to going on and being well. I know that taking that 1 hour for me today allows me to give 14 hours to everyone else tomorrow.
Brilliant. Second question.
Hi, Clarke. I just want to ask, how can someone reset when life has just become too much?
Yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful question. And again, it will be individual to certain people, but my resets are in retreat. They're always in retreat. And it's one of the hardest things to do in the modern age is to turn your phone off. Because that phone, yes, it is important for access, but we've fallen into the trap of being accessible 24 hours a day means that we're available 24 hours a day.
To our employers, and that's wrong.
Distinct difference. So for me, retreat, cut connection for a specific amount of time, and then engage with those who matter to me, which for me is family time. It might be different for you, it might be pets, blah, blah, blah. But I think... for me, a reset comes with retreat. Disconnect from that distracts you. Anchor yourself in yourself and the moment, and then you're rejuvenated to go again.
And it's about reinventing yourself, isn't it? And about doing pause and knowing that you can do things differently. I was born into a Man United house. I married a Liverpool house. But we're just going to leave it there because we've come to the end of it.
I know some really good therapists, Mary-Louise, some really good therapists.
Clarke, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
You've been listening to this special episode of The Lens with Mary-Louise Connolly in the driving seat this time round. And if your business would like support to develop health and wellbeing initiatives that work, please visit www.bitc.org.uk to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do tune in next time with me, Sarah Travers.